Hi and welcome to Healing Solidarity, Embodying Change, the second conference about reimagining international development. I'm Marian Clements, a feminist writer, facilitator, activist and coach, and I'm the initiator of Healing Solidarity. And this conversation, I'm talking with Natsnet and Laurie from Raising Voices in Uganda about how they've come to integrate both self and collective care in their work. They share personal and practical reflections on what this journey has meant for them as an organisation and as individuals, why care doesn't need to be costly, and why caring for themselves and one another is a political act that supports the impact of their work to prevent violence against women. This conversation has got so much practical knowledge and ideas in it about how we can really embody the change that we want to see in the world. And I really hope that you'll enjoy listening to it and get a lot out of it too. Enjoy. So hi and welcome to Healing Solidarity. I'm here with Laurie and Natsnet from Raising Voices. I'm really excited to talk to you today, especially around their work on self and collective care, Raising Voices. But it'd be really great, just first of all, to hear from you both a bit about yourselves and your work, just in general, to let people know who you are.
Sure. So hi, everybody. I'm Laurie Michau, and I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of Raising Voices. And I have the good fortune of working with Natsnet on the violence against women team. So we lead the team together and have been for many years now, actually. And our work is really focused around violence prevention. So we really try to figure out how to do the work of preventing violence against women at the community level, and then learn from that work, and then take that learning to influence the broader field in terms of policy, funding, program design around ethical and effective violence prevention.
Hi everyone, I'm Natsnet. I work with Laurie very closely on the violence against women prevention program at Raising Voices, and I'm very happy to be here today.
Great, welcome both of you. So I think let's just dive into our topic a little bit and just explore what you mean really when you talk about self and collective care. Yeah, let's start with that.
Sure. So self and collective care for us is really, we've kind of come to it organically over time, a lot out of our own need and our own desire to give and feel more care, feel it ourselves and give it to each other. But for us, it's really around kindness and compassion toward ourselves as people and toward each other. So very much intentionally cultivating kindness and compassion, and really nurturing ourselves as whole people. So, our physical bodies, our mental health, our spirituality, and also our social aspect. For us at Raising Voices, we're very much about connection, and we feel like connection and relationships are really foundational to the relationship with ourselves as self-care, but also to each other as collective care, and trying to hold that space together as people, but also as an organization.
Right. And when you talk about it kind of evolving organically from the work you do you want to say a little bit more about how that came about through the course of the work you've done together and the work of the organization, maybe?
I think we were really tired, not so, Natsnet? we saw so many other people. Yeah, we saw so many of us and women that we love and care for and have worked with for years and years, and we all felt tired, and we noticed that we were not as young maybe as we used to be, or as healthy in some cases, and that we were losing activists, and this really hurt our hearts, really, to see it amongst ourselves. And then we started looking. We looked with partners, we looked in communities where we worked, and we saw that women really needed a lot of care, and starting with ourselves. And so that's when we really started asking people in a fairly structured and systematic way through a consultation that we did with activists across the Global South, just to ask them, how are you? Are you okay? And what's in your heart and what's in your head, and how are you doing as a person? Not like, what are you accomplishing and how great is your program, but like, how are you as a person? And we felt like we needed that, and then we felt like other women that we knew needed that.
And when you asked them, what did you hear back? Do you want to share a bit about the finding of that, or just the, not so much the finding, but the response, right?
Yeah. Natsnet, do you want to take that?
Oh, yeah, definitely people were sharing like how tired they feel, like some of them sharing like they're feeling burnout. And we have also seen some colleagues leaving the work that they've been doing because it really gets deep in terms of their motivation, inspiration, and like their level of activism really goes down because of limited access to self and collective care. So during that consultation, they really communicate loud and clear. It's really needed in the field.
And it sounds like you conceptualize that both kind of from the self and then also within the organization as well as around it. I don't know, do you want to say a bit more about whether you think, like, I don't know, self-care and collective care are different things, or really they're just different ways of expressing, or yeah, just speak a bit to that maybe.
I think it's very hard to kind of split them, especially in the work that we do, where we are promoting feminist way of working, when you're really like, you can't be well when your sister is not really well. So but when you care for yourself, you're also somehow contributing to well-being of your sister and other sisters. So it's quite difficult to split the self and the collective, and that's why we speak about these two things together. Laurie, do you want to add?
Sure, I'll add a little. I think we also really thought about the collective care because of the responsibility that the organization could take in supporting this. So that, often we think it's such our responsibility, and yet everything is our responsibility as women. And that just overburdens us even more. And so I think we really wanted to think about also, even though conceptually, exactly as Natsnet is saying, it's the same sort of idea, but I think we also wanted to think about collective care, because what can we do as a feminist organization? Yep. What can we do as an organization that runs feminist programming? How are we building the infrastructure within our organization and within our programs to, express this value that we have around self-care for people, and take on some of that responsibility, so that it isn't just women thinking, okay, here's one more thing I have to do, because that's how we feel a lot, right? That it's like, oh great, now I'm mad at self-care too. So it's like trying to figure out how the organization and our programming can take some of the weight and support that for women and men.
Yeah, okay, I get that. And so from the organization perspective, do you want to talk a bit about what Raising Voices has done, how that's gone, what you've learned in the process?
Do you want me to start, Natsnet?
Yes, please. Okay. No, you can talk about like how at our organizational level within our space, then I can maybe share on what we are doing within the program.
Okay. Sure. So I think first and foremost, it's really having that intention and trying to making a decision, basically, that we're going to prioritize this as an organization, and we're going to figure out how to do this. And then, it's really been interesting to think about, how does that manifest? What does that actually look like within our organizations, right? And for us as a feminist organization, it's really our beginning point for pretty much everything is our values. So what values do we have, and what values do we hold, and how are those values collectively decided upon and then actually collectively lived, right? Which is like a very big topic in and of itself. But that's at the core, right? And one of our values at Raising Voices is putting people first. And that's a very foundational value that we have, and really informs the work that we do around self and collective care. So I think, really right from the beginning, sometimes we think of self-care as, oh, we're going to go do breathing exercises, and we're going to go do yoga, and we're going to go do, like all this stuff. But actually, institutionally, we can do a lot that brings self and collective care because it's around kindness, compassion, and safety, right? And if those are things that we're trying to promote as an organization, what do we need to do in order to do that? And so, you know, for us, there's a lot of work around policies so that there's clear policies, people understand the code of conduct, that there is policies around sexual harassment and people feel safe, and also safe in knowing where they stand within the organization, right? So making sure that people have clear expectations of what's expected, what's not expected, what's okay and what isn't, how people get hired, that there's transparency in processes, that there's transparency in salaries and promotions and how you get to the next level. That gives people a sense of being held, I think, by an organization, and safety that has been important to us. And then I think that there's also a whole range of benefits that we can encourage and support. Of course, you know, one of the things that we learned in the global self-consultation is a lot of women, you know, basically have been working their whole lives, and now they're in their 60s and 70s and they have no retirement, and they have no money, and they have no health insurance. And so it was so deeply sad, actually, to hear activists who've given their whole life to the movement, and they're now like thinking, where am I going to live? How am I going to pay my rent? Do I have to go sleep on my daughter's couch? You know what I mean? Like, that's not right. That's not okay. And so making sure that people are paid fairly and equitably for their work, and that they have benefits, and that we're building up also benefits for their future. It's not just what we can get out of staff for now, but like helping people think about and providing benefits for when they depart as well, which I think is really important. If you're in a context that does provide preventive health care, that's great. Uganda's not really that context, so that's a harder one. So we have a smaller staff welfare fund that people can access for more preventive care. But we have, you know, policies that support people as whole people. So for breastfeeding mothers, for moms who, you know, have small children and babies, and they need to travel for work, but then they need to bring a caretaker with them, right? And that the organization will pay for that. That we have flexi time for staff, that, you know, often, you know, our life between 9 and 5, there's a lot of stuff that has to get done between that time as well. You got to go renew your driver's license, and you got to go pay your electric bill or whatever. You got to go to a thing at your kid's school. And so like allowing people flexibility to say, okay, I'm going to take off here, but I'm going to make it up here. And so that like helping people see that like we're on their side and we see them more fully. And we also are, you know, really lucky to have a board that does support a sabbatical policy for us as an organization. And that sabbatical policy is available to anyone and everyone at the organization, no matter what sort of level or, you know, salary structure you're at. If you've been at the organization for longer than 7 years, you're eligible for sabbatical. And I think that that's really important. And then we also at Raising Voices really try to take care of our environment. We think that the space that we're in every day really impacts our own perception of ourselves, of our wellness. And so we, as you can see from Natsnet, we like color. So we have a lot of color around the office. We have beautiful murals that people have painted. We try to, you know, just like make the environment nice and that you actually want to be in. We spend so much of our time in our space that actually having a nice space is really important. And doing like really simple things. And Natsnet will talk probably about what we do at the team level and processes and things. I think, do you want to talk about that, Natsnet, a little bit about processes and things that the team can do?
Sure. Maybe before I go to those points, I would like also to add on what we do at organizational level. We also look at staff development and staff growth as part and parcel of self-care, because we want people to be motivated, inspired, and continue growing and expanding. So we have sessions, like regular sessions around staff development, not only like technical skills and competency to do the work, but also like to enjoy life, like recently we had a discussion around the importance of sleep and the importance of financial management and so on. So we really talk about diverse things to ensure some meaning and kind of help each other to kind of continue growing and expanding. And moving at like a team process, like we have like processes at the broader organizational level, and then we have also some specific team or department related processes. So we organize like retreats at all levels, and we set them in a way that are fun yet serious, and then kind of balancing all those beautiful things that we would love to have. But at a program level, just in line to the value that Lori had mentioned, like putting people first, we want to also help partners, members of the GBB Prevention Network, and women at the community level to have some sort of access and information about self-care. So when we are organizing training workshops as Raising Voices, we really organize and host a lot of processes and trainings. When we are organizing it, we are very conscious on how to set them up and as well as how to kind of maintain them as a safe space. So when we are like setting them up, we encourage people to bring their whole self, and then we also feel responsible and accountable to maintain it as a safe space. So color is everywhere. When we are setting up the room, we'll definitely add some colors. We would put like some inspiring quotes around the walls of the room. And when we are selecting the venue, we are also a bit deliberate around like, is this healthy space for people to spend a week in that space? So we would talk about what kind of snack do they provide? Is it healthy? And we would also top up with like healthy fruit snacks and so on. And we definitely have at least one session to talk about the importance of self-care and then to help people to reflect about their own care and then also their collective care. And then from time to time, we are also trying to get it more practical. People would go with some kind of clarity, some actionable points that they can take it with them. We would organize like a well-being activity, Zumba, hip hop, depending or yoga, depending what kind of group we have. And basically, this is what we do. We also encourage organization. We don't do like service provision, but for those who are doing service provision, we encourage them to think about their the well-being of the staff who are on the front lines. If they are providing services, they are at a higher risk of burnout and secondary trauma. So we encourage them to think about debriefs, counseling support, and so on. I think this is what I can. Lori, if you want to add, like if I have missed something around how we infuse it. And then I think it's one thing that we also want to do is for example, we have a methodology that we recently revised, SASA together, and we have infused self-care into it. So people are kind of supported first to think about self-care when they are doing violence against women prevention. And there are also some concrete guidance and tools to help them implement the intention around self-care.
So you're able to build it into the programs that you're working on as well as the organizational piece. It's really interesting how you've thought about it at every level, I think. So it sounds like you've been doing it for quite a while, and I know that I've read that you have been doing it for quite a while. So I guess it'd be interesting to hear, and for people listening, maybe to know like what benefits you've seen and also what challenges there've been as well.
Lori, I can go ahead on the benefits. Maybe you can pick up on the challenge. One, just in relation to what we have shared, that came out during the consultation, people are feeling burnout and they're leaving this field of activism. So if there is a provision and a support for a collective care, it's a way of helping people to stay motivated and feeling that they are cared for, and that they can continue continue their activism. And at a broader level, at an organizational level, it's also about staff retention. And we also believe, like, if people have access to better care, the quality of program can also be improved. Although it sounds like a bit political. So, like, recently we had a conversation at SBRI around this topic. There is like a kind of a debate, or do we just want to do it as people deserve care, or it's a way of improving product? We feel like it's our value to care for people. We are leaning more towards a value of care, but it will also have a benefit to increasing impact and staff retention.
That's an interesting challenge in the thinking about it. If it see that if you lean too much towards thinking about it as a kind of almost an output or something, like if we care for people, we'll retain staff, you might lose some of the important context and nuance around why care is important, right?
Yeah, but we would love to frame it as it's an end by itself. It's not a means to an end.
Yeah.
And it also so much fits in within our organizational beliefs, because if our work is all about challenging power and patriarchy, and this is really an affront to that. Like, we see self-care as political work, not just being nice to people, but actually it's political work to allow and encourage women to claim their own space and their own minds and bodies and take care of them. Like, we, as many folks have said, it really is very political work to do this, and we do see it as a direct connection to the work that we do on violence against women, which I think is important.
Yeah, and in that sense, you also try to influence maybe other organizations in your networks and that you work alongside, or even that fund you, I don't know, in that way too.
Absolutely. And so, one of the things that we've really tried to do is get away from the sort of northern idea that, okay, self-care is, going to a massage and going to a yoga class. Like, most women don't have access to that. And so we're really trying to reconceptualize it in a different way, that self-care can be about safe relationships that we have with ourselves and each other. It can be about joy and pleasure in very simple and free things. It can also just be really, putting people first and helping them recognize that their own value and worth as themselves as human beings, rather than what they can produce, which is more and more in our environment. And I think that you said earlier, Marianne, that you've been doing it a long time. It's really an evolution for us, and we're continually really learning and definitely messing up here and there. And I think that what we're finding is that the more we can integrate it into everyday life and, just do simple things along the way, it's really important to be able to do that for ourselves and the movement that we care so much about.
Mm-hmm. And not wanting to put you on the spot, but when you talk about messing up, I think it's interesting for people to hear a bit about the sort of what's difficult or what gets in the way. I know that a lot of the people I've worked with around this, some of the things that keep coming up have been around, the sense that people have that it's kind of not okay, particularly in a work context, to kind of look after them. I don't know if that comes up for you, but I'd be interested to hear what kind of barriers you.
Yeah, definitely. I think new staff are a little under culture shock sometimes when they come to us. They're like, what are these people? They want to be in my stuff, you know, like,
right.
we're like, no, we really don't. But like, it's very hard. Like we had an intern actually this summer who was not used to working in the kind of environment where we were. And it was so hard for her to really trust that, you know, you can say stuff, you can open up, you can be actually who you are and say your real opinions, not the ones that you think you're supposed to say. And so it's very disarming for people, for many staff, for many interns, many people. It's been really hard for them because they're like, wait, like, should I just, it's this thing, like when you build relationships and see people as people are really messy, right? Like all of us are very messy, complex, like it's not a neat thing to be in real authentic relationship with people. And so there is a challenge sometimes to balance like authenticity and care for people. And also like, we're here to do work. Like this is what we get funded for. We take that very seriously. And we have to make sure that we are being efficient and ethical with the funding that we have. And so we do need to get stuff done. And so how do we balance that with, you know, trying to make sure that we are, you know, helping people feel safe enough to share what's going on for them and to feel safe disclosing. But again, I think we can do a little, we can do a lot for a little that people, you know, if there is an open door policy, if you feel like you can go and speak with your supervisor and have an honest conversation, you might not like the answer that you get. We can't give the right, the best answer and give everyone everything that they want all the time. Like it's not possible. We can't do that. But I think when you build a relationship, people, then when you have to say no and you have to say, actually, like as an organization, we can't manage that. Then people say, okay, well, and they respect that more because they know it's coming from an authentic place. And so I think that that's an important thing. I also think we've had to do some work as well with staff that think, oh, look at, like, you know, this is great. Like, I'm going to get all this stuff from Raising Voices. And I think that we've had to really be careful around that and say that there's expectations that Raising Voices is going to really try to give. As you know, and really treat you differently than just someone who's producing, but then we also expect something back, so that it can become kind of one way, like what can I get, especially if you've been in an environment of scarcity and that like nobody, you know, like it's really a competitive space. You get into a collaborative space and a cooperative space, and it's kind of where things are accessible. People can sort of go back to that scarcity mindset and be like, okay, I'm going to take all I can get right now because this is what I can get. And we've had to do work with staff and say, actually, like Raising Voices is going to give, and there's a real expectation for you to give back, you know, to give your time, to give your energy, to give your positive spirit, and you know, that it does have to be mutual. Otherwise you feel like that you just, you know, as a leader of an organization, you feel like the organization is being taken advantage of, and that doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and I know what I sometimes hear when people are kind of resistant to some of these ideas is a kind of, oh, I already feel like people take advantage, or I already feel like people have too, you know, there's too much, I don't know, listening to people's problems or those kinds of things, right? And I think it's interesting that you talk about that. It seems to me like there's a rigor about, you know, the integration of kind of care with the work. Like it's not like just one or the other, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think what helps around that is when there is a politicized frame around it. So we see it as feminist action. And that's part of healing and part of doing violence prevention work, that we can't do this work well if we are not whole. Like we just can't. And so really trying to keep that at the fore. And also, you know, like part of it is also saying no sometimes. Like I think that sometimes there's the expectation of, oh, you know, if your organization is really trying to ensure that people feel safe and respected and valued. There are certain expectations of what that means, and being clear about what the organization can do and cannot do. And you have to make those hard calls sometimes, and that's okay. That's also being honest and real.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, we have to be making decisions that are in the best interest of the organization, because that's why we're all here and why we all exist. So we can't be doing things that compromise the integrity of the organization or the ethics of the organization for individuals. And that's really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about what would you ask of people, and also what would you recommend or suggest to them around these principles, and how we should, I guess, implement them further. Because I think people listening to Healing Solidarity might be interested in, okay, how can I kind of take this forward in whichever part of kind of work for change I'm involved in,
Yeah. Natsnet, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I think this issue, or the idea of self and collective care, can be handled at different level, and each of us have something to do to promote and maintain a culture of care. So maybe I could say something around, as activists, what can we do? Yeah. And maybe Laurie can also add maybe what we could do at a more structural level. As activists, we should really prioritize ourselves. I know the system and the culture, the expectations, especially our women activists, is we're expected to care for others, and we put ourselves the last in the list. So we should really claim the worth that we have, and try to understand what makes us feel energized, what makes us feel happy, and what can we do to draw pleasure from our experience is very important. And we should also try to frame it like self-care as simple things that we could do on daily basis. Because sometimes when we frame it as luxurious, expensive treat for ourselves, we are kind of discouraged from even thinking about self-care. So it's very important to kind of simplify, and then first and foremost, claiming our worth and value, and recognizing that we do really deserve to be cared for and to receive care. Something that I also want to flag, activists, especially in humanitarian setting, really, really have layers and layers of stress factor. So it would be really to kind of claim and do some small things to make us feel energized and cared for.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Natsnet. I think it's really important to recognize that different women in different situations do really have extra circumstances, right? Whether they're living with HIV, or whether they're living with disability, or they're living under violence, or working in or living in humanitarian settings, or even in very poor urban settings, or whatever. Everyone really has a very different experience, and that there isn't really one size fits all. So I think your suggestion, Natsnet, to really kind of try to hear for yourself what is important and feels good to you, I think is really sound advice. I think the ask or recommendation for some organization at the organizational level, I think one is talk about it, actually start to have these conversations within the team and within your organization, and see how people feel about it and what they think about it. And, you might get some interesting responses. I think the other is trying to role model it, so that those in leadership positions especially, but everybody within the organization, if we can all role model better care for ourselves and each other, I think that that really goes a long way. And, especially in terms of leadership, role modeling safe space and helping people feel safe within the organization, more broadly, I think is really important and helpful. And then I think for us, we really try to think about it along those 4 areas of values. So is the organization driven by values, and do those values, put people at the center? What kind of policies do you have? And again, you don't need huge budgets, but even simple policies that make people feel a little bit more seen and heard. Take a look at your environment. That can be very important. And then processes, like how are you getting together as a team and engaging with each other and building that collectivity together. And then, I think for funders, that it's great to keep talking with our funders about this and share with them, the good and the bad, the stories of where we've lost activists and some of our sisters to this work because they can't afford it. They're exhausted. They've left because they can't keep going in this work. And we don't want to lose. Sometimes, especially when we were talking to younger activists, they were like, that whole feminist thing doesn't look all that fun, like that looks really rough. And like, you guys, you're not making it look so good. And I think we have to really hear that, right? That if we're feeling kind of no joy, no pleasure, no solidarity with each other and ourselves in our life, how is that inspiring a new generation of activists and feminists to come up? We're not. So like, we have to like really think about that. And I think that finding, ways of talking about that internally and also with the groups that we partner with that fund us, to say that it's not sort of a nice thing to do on the side, but it's actually really core to building movement, to making sure that we are living our values, and to ensuring that activism is going to be strong and that we can really actually do our work in a powerful and healthy way.
Yeah, right. I totally agree with all of that. And I kind of had one question that came up for me when you were talking about funders, because I think the question people often ask is, how am I going to pay for it? And I know that you have said that, not everything you do costs money. And I think that's absolutely right, that so much of this is about relational stuff and it's not necessarily about money. But there are sometimes things that cost money in this, right?
Yeah.
Have you been able to fund it in some ways? How have you done that? Are there lessons that other people might be able to draw on from raising sources around that?
Yeah. Well, I think you can, and Natsnet, you might have some other ideas, but I think, that we can infuse it within our existing work. So everyone holds a workshop, but how are you going to hold that workshop? Where are you going to have it? It doesn't have to be the fanciest place. It has to be a safe space where you can go breathe outside maybe, or up on the roof if there's no outside space, think about that. And then think about the content. If you do even one session for 2 hours, or, you do a session in the evening where you help people kind of connect with each other and reflect on positive things that they've learned from the team. Like there can be we all do programming, we all do, campaigns, but like the content of what we do can really change. And I think that that's the important first step. Think about what you already have. Don't think about raising tons of money for it. And that's a big thing. Think about what infrastructure that you have. Do you have a team meeting? Do you what can you do? Can you bring a small game to connect people in that space? Can you do a breathing exercise at the beginning of that? Can you ask people how they actually are, not just what they did? Think about integration first. And then think about, we all paint our offices. Well, instead of getting that beige color, get some brightness. Instead of getting the curtain that is navy blue, get the magenta one, it really does help people feel a different sense of self. And so really think about integrating it into, I think, day-to-day life is better than thinking, okay, we're going to just go fundraise. Because honestly, if any of us put together a big proposal around, this is how we're going to bring self-care into our organization, I mean, there's going to be very few takers on that, honestly, at this point. And so it's really about just changing the way that we see what we're already doing and trying to make sure that we are more intentional about care in the existing spaces.
Right. Yeah. I hear
and like
that.
I'll just say this one last thing. One of our favorite things is we do every other week we do hip hop, and we have this guy come, and he gets paid it's very, very little, and he comes and we all get in our main room and we all look totally ridiculous doing our hip hop, and we love it. We have so much fun, and it's a real builder, and it's also giving us exercise, and it's just like very simple, and it really is less than a stack of flip chart paper. So
yeah,
but better benefits.
Love it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Lori. Did you want to add nothing on that?
Yeah, I think I agree with Lori. Like most of the things about self-care is about wearing new lens and doing the stuff that we've been doing in a different way. But it doesn't mean that like resources will not be required. And I think donors have some sort of responsibility to support that, because there were also processes that we have been doing at a regional level, like especially with the GBV Prevention Network, that involved resource. And from what we have heard as a feedback from activists who have been part of this is like it's been really, really helpful for them to conceptualize self-care, and then also to have access to a space where they could really have a test of some activities around well-being and care. So yeah, there are a lot of things that we could do without additional resource, but just a new mindset to doing things. But at the same time, there are also moments that we need additional resource to, especially when we are doing a collective one at a broader, like a regional or global level.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, right. I see that. That's really helpful for people to think about. I think there's definitely ways you can use a bit of extra resource, and at the same time, there's so much that you can do without it, right? So yeah. Thank you both so much for this conversation and for sharing about the work of raising voices, particularly around your self and collective care. I hope it's going to inspire lots of people. Thank you for being with me today.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you involving us, and we look forward to learning from everybody else in the conference as well. So thank you so much.
You've been listening to me, Marianne Clements, in conversation with Natsnet and Lori from Raising Voices, and this is Healing Solidarity, Embodying Change, the second conference about reimagining international development. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation today. If you'd like to spend a bit more time with the ideas and suggestions in this talk or in any of the others in this conference, don't forget you can make a contribution to support the production of the conference, get access to recordings and resources which will help you go deeper with these themes and ideas. Just click the link below this video to find out more.